Something most people never question is what actually happens inside the brain during the hours they are asleep. Night after night, routines feel harmless, even comforting. Yet some of these habits quietly place the brain under unnecessary strain. What is rarely discussed is that certain patterns during sleep can interfere with blood flow, oxygen delivery, and vascular stability in ways that are not immediately felt. There is no sharp warning, no sudden discomfort, just a slow accumulation of risk that builds silently over time. And when it comes to the brain, silence is often where the greatest damage begins. One of the most overlooked dangers is how the body positions itself during sleep. It may seem insignificant, but prolonged pressure in certain positions can subtly affect circulation to the brain and neck. When blood flow becomes restricted or inconsistent, even for short periods, it can increase the likelihood of small vascular stress. Over months or years, this repeated strain may contribute to conditions that raise the risk of stroke. The problem is not what happens in a single night, but what happens across hundreds of nights without awareness. The brain depends on stable, uninterrupted circulation, and even minor disruptions can have long-term consequences. Another factor that deserves attention is breathing quality during sleep. Many people experience shallow or irregular breathing without realizing it, especially as they age. This reduces oxygen levels reaching the brain, forcing it to work harder under less than ideal conditions. When oxygen supply fluctuates, the brain's blood vessels respond by tightening and relaxing unpredictably, which can create additional stress on already aging vascular systems. Over time, this pattern may weaken the resilience of those vessels, making them more vulnerable to blockage or rupture. It is not dramatic, but it is persistent, and persistence is what makes it dangerous. Temperature and environment also play a larger role than most assume. Sleeping in a room that is too warm or poorly ventilated can subtly increase heart rate and affect blood pressure during the night. The body, instead of entering a deep restorative state, remains slightly elevated, almost as if it never fully relaxes. This ongoing elevation can contribute to long-term cardiovascular strain, which directly impacts brain health. When the heart and vessels are under constant pressure, the brain becomes one of the first systems to feel the consequences. It is a quiet chain reaction that begins with something as simple as the air you breathe while you sleep. What makes these habits especially concerning is that they rarely produce immediate symptoms. There is no pain to signal a problem, no clear moment when something feels wrong. Everything appears normal on the surface. But beneath that surface, the brain may already be adapting to conditions that are far from ideal. Over time, these adaptations can turn into vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities, when combined with age or other risk factors, can lead to serious outcomes. Understanding this is not about fear, but about awareness. Because once these patterns are recognized, they can be adjusted. And small adjustments, repeated consistently, can dramatically shift long-term outcomes. There are, however, ways to support the brain during sleep and reduce these hidden risks. Simple changes in positioning, breathing awareness, and sleep environment can help restore balance and protect the delicate systems that keep the brain functioning properly. The key is not complexity, but consistency. When the body is given the right conditions night after night, it begins to repair, stabilize, and strengthen itself in ways that are not immediately visible, but deeply impactful. And this is where real prevention begins, not with drastic measures, but with quiet, intentional habits repeated over time. The next step is understanding which specific habits are placing the most strain on the brain without you noticing, and how to replace them with patterns that actively support circulation, oxygen flow, and vascular health. Because once you see them clearly, it becomes much easier to take control of what happens during those hours when your body is meant to recover, not deteriorate. One of the most common patterns that quietly places the brain under stress during the night is sleeping flat on the back for extended periods without proper support. While it may seem like a neutral position, for many adults, especially after the age of 60, this posture can allow the airway to partially collapse, leading to subtle interruptions in breathing. These interruptions may be so brief that they are never remembered, yet they can happen dozens of times throughout the night. Each time breathing is disrupted, oxygen levels dip slightly, and the brain is forced to react, adjusting blood flow and heart rhythm to compensate. Over time, this repeated cycle can place unnecessary strain on delicate blood vessels, increasing vulnerability where stability is most needed. This becomes even more concerning when combined with undiagnosed sleep-breathing issues. Many individuals assume they are sleeping well simply because they fall asleep quickly or remain in bed for several hours. However, quality sleep is not measured by duration alone, but by how consistently the brain receives oxygen and maintains stable circulation throughout the night. When breathing is compromised, even subtly, the brain enters a fragmented state of rest, where it is repeatedly pulled out of deeper, restorative phases. This not only affects energy and mental clarity the next day, but also places ongoing pressure on vascular systems that are meant to recover during sleep, not be challenged by it. Another habit that often goes unnoticed is the use of pillows that elevate the head too sharply or fail to support the natural alignment of the neck. Improper alignment can compress key blood vessels that supply the brain, particularly those that run along the sides of the neck. When these pathways are slightly restricted for hours at a time, blood flow may become less efficient, especially in individuals whose vascular systems are already less flexible with age. The brain depends on a steady, unobstructed supply of blood, and even minor reductions over long periods can contribute to cumulative stress. What feels comfortable in the moment may not be supportive in the long term. Hydration before sleep is another area where small habits can have significant effects. Going to bed either dehydrated or excessively hydrated can both create problems. Insufficient hydration may thicken the blood slightly, making it more difficult to circulate smoothly through smaller vessels. On the other hand, consuming large amounts of fluids right before bed can lead to frequent awakenings, disrupting sleep cycles, and preventing the brain from reaching its most restorative stages. The goal is balance, maintaining adequate hydration throughout the day so that the body can enter sleep in a stable, optimized state without needing to compensate during the night. Exposure to artificial light late in the evening also plays a more critical role than many realize. Bright screens and harsh lighting can interfere with the brain's natural production of melatonin, the hormone responsible for regulating sleep cycles. When melatonin levels are disrupted, sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented, even if it appears continuous. This fragmentation reduces the time spent in deeper stages of sleep, where essential repair processes occur. Without sufficient deep sleep, the brain's ability to regulate blood pressure, clear metabolic waste, and maintain vascular health becomes compromised. Over time, this can contribute to conditions that increase stroke risk without ever presenting obvious warning signs. It is important to understand that none of these habits are dramatic on their own. They do not cause immediate harm, and that is precisely why they are often ignored. The real issue lies in repetition. Night after night, these small patterns accumulate, gradually shaping the internal environment of the brain. When the brain is consistently placed under subtle stress, it adapts. But those adaptations are not always beneficial. They can lead to reduced resilience, making it more difficult for the brain to respond to sudden challenges or recover from minor disruptions. The encouraging reality is that these habits can be adjusted without difficulty once they are recognized. Simple changes in sleep position, pillow support, hydration timing, and evening light exposure can create a significantly more stable environment for the brain. And when stability is restored, the body begins to function as it was designed to, maintaining balance, protecting its systems, and reducing unnecessary risk. The next step is understanding which specific nighttime behaviors actively support brain health and how to integrate them into a routine that strengthens, rather than strains, the body during sleep. There are also protective habits that, when practiced consistently, can transform sleep from a passive state into an active period of restoration for the brain. One of the most effective is maintaining a slightly elevated and properly aligned sleeping position, not excessively upright, but gently supported in a way that keeps the airway open and the neck in a neutral line with the spine. This allows blood to flow more freely to and from the brain, reducing unnecessary pressure on the vessels that supply oxygen and nutrients. When alignment is correct, the body does not need to compensate, and the brain can remain in a stable, well-oxygenated state throughout the night. Breathing patterns during sleep can also be improved with small but intentional adjustments before going to bed. Slowing down the breath, avoiding heavy meals late in the evening, and giving the body time to settle can reduce the likelihood of shallow or irregular breathing once asleep. When breathing remains steady, oxygen delivery becomes more consistent, and the brain is able to maintain equilibrium without frequent interruptions. This stability supports the integrity of blood vessels and helps reduce fluctuations in blood pressure that may otherwise occur during fragmented sleep cycles. Another powerful yet simple habit is creating a sleep environment that encourages deep, uninterrupted rest. A cool, dark, and quiet room allows the body to naturally transition into deeper stages of sleep where the brain performs essential maintenance. During these stages, the brain clears metabolic waste, regulates internal pressure, and supports the repair of vascular tissues. Without sufficient deep sleep, these processes become less effective, and over time, that inefficiency can contribute to increased neurological risk. Optimizing the environment is not about comfort alone, but about enabling the brain to carry out functions that are critical for long-term health. Timing also plays a significant role in how the brain responds during sleep. Going to bed and waking up at consistent hours helps regulate internal rhythms, allowing the body to anticipate and prepare for rest. Irregular sleep schedules, on the other hand, can confuse these rhythms, leading to lighter, less restorative sleep. When the body does not know when to fully relax, it may remain in a semi-alert state, preventing the brain from reaching the depth of rest it requires. Consistency, in this context, becomes a form of protection, reinforcing patterns that support both mental clarity and vascular stability. Nutrition earlier in the day also influences what happens at night. Meals rich in balanced nutrients support stable blood sugar levels, which in turn reduce nighttime fluctuations that can disturb sleep. When blood sugar drops or spikes during the night, the body responds with hormonal adjustments that may subtly increase heart rate and blood pressure. Over time, these repeated fluctuations can place additional strain on the cardiovascular system, which directly impacts the brain. Maintaining steady energy levels throughout the day allows the body to enter sleep without needing to correct imbalances. Physical movement during the day is another factor that extends into nighttime health. Regular activity supports circulation, strengthens blood vessels, and improves the body's ability to regulate blood pressure. When circulation is strong, the brain benefits from more efficient oxygen delivery, both during the day and at night. This reduces the likelihood of stagnation or irregular flow, creating a more stable internal environment. Even moderate, consistent movement can have a lasting impact, reinforcing the systems that protect the brain while you sleep. These habits may appear simple, but their combined effect is profound. Each one contributes to a stable, supportive environment where the brain can function without unnecessary stress. Over time, this stability becomes a form of resilience, allowing the brain to better withstand challenges and maintain its health. The difference is not made in a single night, but across many nights where the body is given the conditions it needs to restore itself properly. What remains is identifying the habits that quietly undermine this process, the ones that seem harmless but interfere with the body's natural ability to recover. Because once these are clearly understood, it becomes possible to remove them and replace them with patterns that support strength, clarity, and long-term protection for the brain. While supportive habits can strengthen the brain during sleep, there are also subtle behaviors that quietly interfere with these protective processes. One of the most common is eating too close to bedtime. When the body is still actively digesting, it cannot fully transition into a deep, restorative state. Instead of slowing down, internal systems remain engaged, keeping heart rate slightly elevated and diverting energy toward digestion rather than repair. This can disrupt the natural drop in blood pressure that should occur during sleep, forcing the cardiovascular system to stay more active than necessary. Over time, this pattern may contribute to increased strain on blood vessels that are meant to rest and recover during the night. Another overlooked factor is the accumulation of mental stimulation before sleep. Engaging with intense or emotionally charged content late in the evening can keep the brain in an alert state long after the lights are off. Even if sleep begins quickly, the underlying activity within the brain may remain elevated, preventing it from reaching deeper, more restorative stages. This heightened activity can influence heart rate variability and blood pressure regulation, both of which play a role in maintaining vascular stability. When the brain does not fully disengage, it cannot fully restore, and that gap between sleep and true recovery becomes more significant over time. Alcohol consumption is another habit that often appears harmless, but carries hidden consequences during sleep. While it may initially create a sense of relaxation or drowsiness, alcohol disrupts the natural architecture of sleep cycles. It reduces the time spent in deeper stages of sleep and increases the likelihood of interruptions throughout the night. This fragmentation affects how the brain regulates blood flow and clears metabolic waste, both of which are essential for maintaining healthy function. In addition, alcohol can contribute to dehydration, which may subtly affect blood viscosity and circulation, further increasing strain on the vascular system. The use of certain medications without proper timing or awareness can also influence how the brain responds during sleep. Some substances may alter blood pressure patterns or interfere with natural sleep cycles, leading to less stable conditions overnight. While medications can be necessary and beneficial, understanding their impact on sleep is important, especially for individuals already managing cardiovascular or neurological concerns. When sleep becomes less stable due to external factors, the brain's ability to maintain balance is reduced, and this can contribute to long-term vulnerability. Another behavior that deserves attention is remaining completely still for prolonged periods without any adjustment in position. While sleep naturally involves reduced movement, staying in a single position for too long can affect circulation, particularly in areas where pressure builds gradually. Slight natural shifts during the night help maintain healthy blood flow and prevent localized restriction. When movement is too limited, especially in positions that are not well supported, it can contribute to subtle circulatory challenges that accumulate over time. It is also worth considering how stress carried into the night can shape what happens during sleep. Even if the body is physically at rest, underlying tension can keep internal systems active. Elevated stress hormones may persist into the night, affecting heart rate, blood pressure, and vascular tone. This creates an environment where the brain is not fully able to enter a state of recovery. Instead, it remains partially engaged, reducing the effectiveness of the processes that protect and restore its function. These patterns are rarely recognized because they do not produce immediate discomfort. They blend into routine, becoming part of what feels normal. But normal does not always mean optimal. Over time, these small disruptions can combine, gradually influencing the conditions under which the brain operates. And when those conditions are less stable, the risk of more serious outcomes begins to rise, often without clear warning. The key is not to eliminate every imperfection, but to become aware of the habits that have the greatest impact. By reducing these hidden stressors, the brain is given the opportunity to return to a more balanced state during sleep. And once that balance is restored, the body can begin to strengthen itself in ways that support long-term health and reduce unnecessary risk. What remains now is understanding how these changes come together to influence not just sleep, but the overall trajectory of brain health over time.